That's right about your father's inheritance. Emily and I will take over all the remaining assets. My mother told me this right after my father's funeral. To be honest, I had no intention of discussing the inheritance on the day my father passed away. However, Emily Everly pushed the conversation forward with sparkling eyes. There's a will, too, Emily continued, displaying the will proudly. Just after Dad went to the hospital, Mom and I visited his room and had him write this. Dad immediately agreed to leave neither inheritance nor anything to you, sis, Emily said. Dad did that. Yeah, he did that, even though he always relied on you. I know it's too harsh. It's pitiful for you, isn't it? But of course, Dad always found me more affable and favored me. No way. Before I could say anything else, my mother continued gleefully, You who have no job, we have no intention of giving you a single penny from the inheritance. We'll be enjoying a trip abroad, so prepare to leave this house by the time we return. Wait, how can I accept this? Why would you do such a thing without giving me a chance to speak? Mom and Emily retorted coldly, Be quiet. It's impossible for you to get anything from us now that Dad's gone. We can finally act freely. Your role here is done, so leave immediately. All the sacrifices you've made for Dad, all you've done for him, and this is the result. How cruel! Giving everything for such an ungrateful father was pointless. Even if you wish for our help now, it's too late. Hearing those words, any remaining familial feelings toward my mother and Emily disappeared entirely. I couldn't accept what they said about my father, whom I deeply respected, without expressing all I wanted to say to my mother and Emily. I understand, I Carly responded. I can't stay with you two any longer. I'll gladly leave. With that, I left my childhood home. My name is Ashley. I have a sister, Emily, who's 4 years younger than me. We're a family of 4 with our 2 parents. Emily's personality is similar to our mother's. She's affable but sometimes lazy. She'd often teased my father and me, who have sincere personalities. Our mother, having a temperament like Emily, felt especially fond of her when we were children. It was evident she favored Emily over me. Whenever she would meet her friends, my mother would only take Emily with her, often leaving me out at home. According to her, it was embarrassing to show plain and quiet Ashley to my friends. On the other hand, my mother was very proud of Emily, who was friendly and loved by everyone. Even with such a mother and sister, the reason I could live my days positively was because of my father. He valued my sincerity and also loved Emily equally. I deeply appreciated and loved my father's fair attitude. Even after becoming an adult, the way my mother treated me remained unchanged. However, thanks to my father's presence, our household remained stable. But after my father retired at 65, an incident occurred at home. He tripped over a small step in the house and broke his bone. Although he tried hard with surgery and rehabilitation, his aging muscles didn't recover easily. As he spent more time bedridden and needed care, my mother and Emily became even colder towards him. Hey, Mom, what do you think about this? Yeah, it looks good. The food seems delicious, too. Maybe we should go with this one. My mother and Emily chatted excitedly while looking at a guidebook. What are you talking about? I asked. My mother answered with a hint of annoyance. We're planning for a family trip. But considering Dad's difficulty in moving around, isn't traveling difficult for him? Responding to my comment, Emily said with a smile, Well, we're not thinking of bringing him in the first place. We plan to leave him at home. That's cruel. It would be hard for him if he's left alone. If Dad's not joining, I will stay home with him. After I said this, my mother and Emily just smiled at each other. Following that, my mother said, That's fine, too. If that's the case, Emily and I will just go by ourselves. Whether you two come or not is up to you, but since it's a family trip, we'll be using money from Dad's bank account. A quick glance at the guidebook revealed they had chosen a room meant for just 2 people. It was clear they had never intended to bring either my father or me along. After that, my mother and Emily frequently went out by themselves, staying at high-quality inns or dining at reputed restaurants. It was as if neither my father nor I existed in the house. I kept an eye on their actions from a distance, trying to finish my work as quickly as possible to take care of my father. When I couldn't handle everything alone, I sought help from care services for tasks like bathing assistance or accompanying my father on short walks around the neighborhood. On days when I had to work overtime, I asked my mother and Emily to look after my father, but they avoided the responsibility. "Ashley, I came to help with the bath, but is there no one at home today?" Upon receiving a notification from the care service staff, I quickly called my mother and Emily. Despite having informed them of the staff's visit in advance, they had left my father alone and gone out. When they finally returned home, I confronted them, but there was no apology. The staff are professionals, right? It's okay even if we aren't there. Dad is an adult. He'll be fine being left alone. We don't want our time taken up caring for him like you. It seemed they genuinely believed they were doing nothing wrong. I realized I couldn't rely on them and decided that taking care of my father was my responsibility. Juggling work and living the daily grind was far from easy, especially since neither my mother nor Emily showed any concern or understanding of my father's condition. My father's condition worsened as the days went by. He spent more time seated than walking and ate much less. As the 9th year of caring for my father approached, I became concerned about how frail he looked. When I took him to the hospital, I was hit with a shocking diagnosis. "Your father has advanced cancer." It can't be. I realized that we might not have much time left with him. Determined to support him in his final days, I quit my job to care for him full-time. I knew I had to tell my mother and Emily about his condition. Their reactions were unexpected when I informed them. "Really? He never drank or smoked. It's unfortunate that such a sincere person ended up with cancer," my mother commented. Emily, with a stunned expression, said, "I can't believe you'd give up your job to take care of Dad. I'd never make that choice." I thought they would be concerned about him, but they showed no signs of it at all. I was honestly surprised by their indifference, as if it was someone else's business. In the end, the two of them only visited him at the hospital for a short time and never really came to pay a proper visit. I supported him daily during his chemotherapy treatments. Despite our best efforts, we couldn't stop the cancer's progression, and half a year later he passed away. The days after the diagnosis went by in a blur. Upon hearing of his death, my mother and Emily started a private discussion and left me to arrange the funeral on my own. Then they disappeared somewhere. I didn't even have time to mourn my father, as I had to arrange the funeral alone. As the funeral began, my mother appeared and started delivering the chief mourner's speech. Despite having done nothing, she put on a face for the public. I was irritated by her behavior, but the funeral proceeded smoothly. Worn out as I headed home, I was invited to the living room by my mother and Emily, who had already returned, saying they had something to discuss. Without any consideration for my exhaustion, my mother abruptly declared, "Regarding your father's inheritance, Emily and I will inherit this house and all other assets." Frankly, I wasn't in the mood to discuss inheritance on the very day my father passed away. However, Emily chimed in, "We even have a proper will." She proudly presented a document and began to explain. "Right after Dad was admitted to the hospital, Mom and I visited him and had him sign this. It states that you won't inherit anything. Dad agreed to it immediately." "Dad did that with a smirk," Emily said. "After all the help you provided, it's so cold, right? Maybe Dad in the end preferred me over his two serious elder daughters." "That's impossible," I started to say, but my mother interrupted with an inappropriate grin. "Clearly, Emily is more adorable. Though your father always stayed home and had no hobbies, he surely saved a lot, right? Mom even quit her job because of the inheritance, and I took some time off work to enjoy the inheritance. Before I could say anything, the two of them continued their conversation. My mother then told me, "You, who have no job, won't get a penny from the inheritance. We plan to enjoy a vacation abroad for a while, so you should leave this place by then." I hurriedly counted, "Wait a minute, do you genuinely believe what you're doing is right?" Without waiting for me to finish, both my mother and Emily firmly responded, "Shut your mouth. It's a waste of time trying to take the inheritance from us. With your father gone, we'll do as we please. Your role here is done. Please leave this house promptly." To think that after all you sacrificed for Dad, this is what you get. There was no need to go to such lengths for such an inept father. It's pointless to regret and think about it now. Hearing those words, any remaining bond I felt for my mother and Emily was completely severed. I couldn't forgive them for speaking that way about my beloved father. Holding back what I wanted to say, I, Carly, told them, "I understand your thoughts. From now on, I can't imagine living together with you two. I'll gladly leave." Despite their initial surprise at my acceptance, the two soon smiled smugly together. "Good to know. Once you leave this house, never rely on us again. Our relationship ends here. Whatever happens to you, we want no part in it. Don't even think of contacting us." Receiving this intense sentiment from my mother, I packed only my essentials and left the house. A few days after the inheritance discussion, something happened. I received an unexpected call from my mother, who had claimed she would cut off contact with me. When I answered, she immediately confronted me in anger. "What have you done? Where has all the money from your father's account gone? Why are you suddenly calling? Didn't you say you wouldn't contact me?" "Silence. This is an emergency. Return your father's savings immediately." "What are you talking about? I left the passbook at the old house, didn't I? I have no way of accessing it after I left, but the money in the account is definitely gone. Such a significant amount of his savings couldn't have disappeared so suddenly. I found it suspicious when you managed to move out so quickly without a job. It seemed my mother had assumed that I had squandered my father's money." "Mom, haven't you ever checked the account balance before?" "Huh, I haven't bothered with such things." "I see. If you had, you would have noticed that Dad's savings weren't that much to begin with." "What do you mean his savings were?" "Oh, where did his retirement money go?" "We used it for our wedding ceremony and the new house." "Wedding? New house? I have no idea what you're talking about." I had been in a romantic relationship with a man named Sean, who was in charge of the caregiving service for my father. Our relationship started through our mutual care for my father. I had told my father about my relationship with Sean. Soon after, we began dating. Sean proposed. At that time, I was overwhelmed with caregiving and work responsibilities and couldn't make a decision. Upon learning the truth, my father said, "Care for yourself more than me. I want you to have a happy marriage," and he cheered me on. Despite my hesitations, he even started helping with the wedding venue selection and looking for a new place to live. We had reserved a wedding date for the following year and signed a contract for a new apartment that my father liked. This all happened 6 months before we found out that he had terminal cancer. As a gesture of gratitude, my father covered most of the costs for the wedding and the new apartment. That was the reason for the decrease in the account balance. Hearing this turn of events, my mother's voice trembled. She was clearly shaken. So there wasn't any inheritance for us to inherit in the first place. Primarily just the family home. But given its location, we shouldn't expect a high selling price. Emily, having overheard the conversation, snatched the phone from my mother in panic. "Wait, so the financial assistance for your wedding is much more than the inheritance for Mom and me. That seems to be the case. Dad knew about my marriage and me leaving the house, so maybe he didn't see a problem in leaving the family home to both of you. He might have used a significant amount for me and intended the inheritance to compensate for that. Could it be that the reason you quit your job was because your marriage had been decided upon? That's right. Sean is also involved in investment activities and is financially stable. He wanted me to become a full-time housewife. Also, I thought if I resigned early, I could focus on taking care of our father. I can't believe it. Why did you keep the news about your marriage and savings a secret from us? Taking a deep breath, I answered, I thought about telling you several times, but every time, neither of you showed any interest and avoided the topic. Why didn't you stop me from taking a break from work or Mom from quitting her part-time job? How are we supposed to live now? When I wanted to talk to you after the funeral, wasn't it you and Mom who shut me down, saying I couldn't expect anything from you? But I thought family members should help each other out. Family? When I was swamped with work and caregiving, you were out having fun, neglecting Dad. How can I think of someone who said such mean things as family? Don't just say whatever is convenient for you. Shocked and lost for words, Emily was taken aback. Afterwards, my mother pleaded with me. Ashley, the truth is, I've already paid for the trip. I'd also made various purchases expecting the inheritance, so now I have no savings left. So what about it? I responded, I've already quit my part-time job. If we don't get any inheritance money, we won't have any money for next month. Until I find a new job, I hope you can lend us some. When you kicked me out of the family home, didn't you say you'd never come to me again? That our relationship was over and that you wouldn't interfere with whatever happens to me in the future? About that, I said, neither of you ever helped when Dad and I were going through tough times. Now, when you're in trouble, you want to rely on me. That's incredibly brazen. But if you don't help us now, what will we do? Without waiting for my mother to finish, I ended the call and blocked their numbers. I was utterly disgusted by my mother and sister, who only claimed to be family when they were in trouble. I decided to distance myself from these two. Later on, I heard from various people that although my mother and Emily had canceled their trip, they couldn't get a refund due to the last-minute cancellation. They had been barely scraping by, asking friends and relatives for money. They had to sell their house, but as I expected, they didn't get as much as they hoped. With the initial expenses for a new place and moving costs, they had hardly any money left. Emily returned to work, but because she asked her colleagues for money, her relationships at work became strained. She had planned to leave her job soon after finding a good partner, but because of the situation, that partner, as well as other men, distanced themselves, along with her friends. My mother tried to find another part-time job, but her previous workplace had already hired someone else, making it hard for her to return. Due to her age, her job opportunities were limited. She's been working diligently, facing complaints from younger colleagues. Currently, they manage their living expenses with my mother's meager part-time salary and Emily's earnings, slowly repaying their debts. Both of them seem worn out. As for me, I was able to have a small wedding at the venue my father chose. The only regret is that my father couldn't be there for my wedding, but I believe he's watching over our happy moments from somewhere. My married life with Sean has been smoother than expected. We're enjoying peaceful and fulfilling days together. I'm eternally grateful to my father for supporting my relationship with Sean and giving me this opportunity. I've had the chance to build a peaceful life with my husband, always remembering my